Revenge with Karen.
The first sign something was off came when HR asked me to verify all current responsibilities for capacity planning. No names, no context, just a bland little email with bullet points and a smiley face at the end like it was a team birthday invite. I almost deleted it, but my gut itched the way it does right before you smell something burning. 12 years. That's how long I'd been tethered to Stratix partners, wearing invisible armor made of clean contracts and stupid early morning calls with the London office. I was the kind of employee they forgot to thank because I never screwed up loudly enough to require applause. I was also the only reason we still had Adverlux. Adverlux wasn't just a big fish. They were the whale. Fortune 500, multiple business lines, and paranoid in all the right ways, especially around government contracts. I knew their appetite for detail. I knew the full scope of their risk profile before their compliance team did. I was there through 2 CFO transitions, a merger scare, and that god-awful brand Refresh when they tried to replace navy blue with ocean whisper. I rewrote their compliance playbook to match new federal disclosure regs 6 months before the regs passed. They trusted me because I never once made them feel like a favor. No one said it out loud. Everyone knew. I was the reason Adverlux stuck around, which is why that email from HR curled in my brain like smoke. When I walked into the office the next morning, coffee in one hand, badge swipe in the other, I passed Kyle in the hallway. He gave me that cheerful little head nod men give when they don't remember your last name, but know you sit near the fridge. He was holding a fresh Stratix-branded onboarding folder. New hire. Marketing, or maybe BD. By noon, he was in the Adverlux Slack channel. At first, I gave it the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was helping with social templates. Maybe it was a rotation. But when he posted a looking forward to diving into this, under an internal compliance thread I personally curated, I knew. I opened a new tab, went straight to the client contract I kept bookmarked, scrolled past the payment schedules and delivery timelines, and landed in the Exhibit H territory. Appendix clauses. There it was, buried but legally binding, key personnel dependencies. Under Account Lead Adverlux North America, my name was still there. Not role, not title, my actual full name, not that anyone had asked me about it. I closed the file, sat there for a long moment, took a slow sip of now cold coffee. Then I did what I always do, I got ahead of it. Started small. Updated my personal documentation files, every client touchpoint, every approval trail. Sent a polite Slack message to legal, flagging that Kyle is now active on Adverlux channels. Just confirming we're in line with contract terms around Exhibit H. No response, not even the typing dots. That night, as I stayed behind past 7 p.m., Adverlux's logo glowed on the big wall screen in the empty conference room across the glass. I watched it flicker like a lighthouse. I wasn't mad. Not yet. I wasn't even surprised. This was the part where you tell yourself maybe it's a misunderstanding. Maybe the firm's just expanding the team. Maybe you're still the glue girl, and that still means something. And if you've made it this far and you're one of the 93% who listens without subscribing, maybe hit that little red button and throw a like while you're at it. Stories like this keep the team going, especially the ones with Exhibit H-shaped plot twists. Anyway, next morning, had a one-on-one with Roger, the only partner who still wore ties like it was 2006. I mentioned the HR email gently. He smiled without blinking and said, "Oh, we're just updating some charts. Making sure we're scalable. You know how it is." I did. And I also knew that when firms start updating charts and using words like scalable, they're not planning to move you up. They're drawing the dotted lines for someone else. Back at my desk, my Adverlux inbox had gone quiet. No follow-ups, no questions. Just the void that happens right before a client either calls legal or ghosts you forever. I opened the Slack logs. Kyle had posted a GIF in response to a data privacy flag, a GIF. I stared at it for a full minute before typing my next move. Not panic, not protest, documentation. The clause wasn't going anywhere. Neither was I, not yet. Nick Withers stormed in like a human linked in post, tanned, loud, unnaturally confident, with teeth too white for November in New York. On his first day as managing director, he slapped the conference table and said, "The age of dependencies is over. If one person's vacation can tank a deal, we're doing it wrong." Everyone laughed, except me. I'd seen his type before. Blew through 4 firms in 8 years, each time leaving behind just enough chaos to call it transformation. He wasn't here to listen. He was here to be quoted. By the end of his first week, he'd already rebranded the strategy team as Client Acceleration. He ditched our quarterly review cadence for a sprint board. And when I asked about the compliance calendar we'd always shared with Adverlux, he blinked like I'd said the word fax machine. "Mary, you're the glue girl," told me once in front of the entire client team. "You keep the old stuff from falling apart. But let's get you into more of a support function so we can scale." I didn't reply. I didn't have to. My silence did the talking while I made mental notes about every single person who nodded along. From that point on, I became a ghost in my own account. My name disappeared from meeting invites. I was left off prep docs. One of the interns asked if I'd switched departments. "Not officially," I said. "Just observing the experiment." Nick brought in Kyle like he was a new Tesla feature, shiny, overhyped, and utterly untested. Kyle's entire resume was built on growth storytelling and a single product launch that got him quoted in a BuzzFeed listicle about startups that pivoted hard. His third day in, he messaged me asking if compliance things were still relevant on the Adverlux scope. I stared at the screen like it had insulted my bloodline. Meanwhile, Nick started doing laps, casual desk flybys, coffee chats, just checking ins, each time dropping more of his catchphrases like he was seeding them for applause. Bandwidth, redundancy mapping, no more single points of failure. Over and over like a sermon. But what he really meant was, "I don't like that the client likes you more than me." Adverlux wasn't a normal client. They had layers. CMO was ex-DUD. The compliance lead used to run audits for the federal government and remembered names better than birthdays. They didn't tolerate fluff. They respected protocol, clarity, history. They respected me. Until now, anyway. I kept my head down and watched the pieces shift. HR scheduled a realignment meeting. Legal stopped replying to my contract nudges. Even the junior analysts started echoing Nick's jargon like it was scripture. But here's the thing about old glue. It doesn't scream when you try to rip it off. It just leaves residue where you least expect it, like Exhibit H, the key person clause buried in the appendix of the Adverlux contract, where Nick never bothered to look. I didn't just know about it, I helped write it. The clause wasn't about my title. It was about my involvement. It gave Adverlux the right to exit the entire retainer without penalty if I was removed without their consent. But Nick didn't ask. He didn't read. He just bulldozed, so I let him. I documented every Slack message, every meeting I was removed from, every client communication I was excluded from. I copied legal discreetly. No caps lock, no drama, just breadcrumb after breadcrumb. The more they erased me from Adverlux, the louder the evidence got. Until the whole thing became a ticking clock, labeled material breach, fine print. And that's when it clicked. Nick didn't understand the difference between being indispensable and being contractual. So I waited, quietly, carefully, and I let him walk right past the warning sign labeled Mary Harmon Required Personnel. Because when you don't read the contract reads you. The subject line read, Team Refresh Strategic Realignment for Q3+. Nick always added plus signs like they meant something. Email went out company-wide at 8:02 a.m. Monday morning. By 8:05, I was no longer listed as the lead on Adverlux. Instead, Kyle was client growth lead, Tira accounts. My name, nowhere. There was no meeting, no warning, not even the courtesy of a hallway ambush. Just a bullet point in an email. Nick caught me in the kitchen later that day, pouring coffee with the kind of fake smile you use for toddlers and press photographers. "Hey, Mary," said, "this refresh is going to give you space to operate more strategically. You're too good to be bogged down in the weeds, you know?" I stared at him over the rim of my mug. Adverlux is strategy. He grinned wider. Exactly. Which is why we've got Kyle diving in. Fresh eyes, big energy. Kyle had big energy, all right. The man couldn't open a Google Doc without turning it into a Slack channel celebration. He forwarded one of my old pitch decks that afternoon, typos and all, without changing the file name. Literally. Adverlux Q2 rollout final used this Mary PPTX. I took a screenshot. By Wednesday, the Adverlux team was asking questions Kyle couldn't answer. Things like, are we compliant with the revised disclosure framework for Phase Roman 2? To which Kyle replied, we'll vibe check that and circle back. He sent emojis to Adverlux. Emojis. That same day, I built a transition folder. Did everything, a checklist of open action items, updated regulatory documents, audit histories, and a client behavior matrix I'd spent 5 years perfecting. I named it Adverlux Handoff Complete. I shared it with Kyle, Nick, and legal. No one acknowledged it, but I wasn't sending it for them. I was sending it for the record. I BCC'd myself on everything. Timestamps, attachments, version history. Opened a fresh personal archive labeled Q3 Transition Adverlux. I wasn't being petty. I was being precise. If this went sideways, and I had zero doubt it would, I wasn't going to be the one with a blank audit trail. The next Friday, as I sat through a forced all-hands Zoom about next-gen client centricity, a calendar invite popped up on my screen. Adverlux contract renewal final signing prep. The invite list included Nick, Kyle, legal, finance, and our CEO. I wasn't on it. The same contract that I helped write. The same contract that held the clause Nick had clearly never read. The one that explicitly named me as a key person. They were preparing to renew it without me in the room. That was the moment something cold settled in my chest. Not fear, not sadness, something harder, sharper, like marble. I didn't storm out. I didn't rage. I smiled politely in the meeting, asked a question about a different client, nodded when someone mentioned synergies. But later that night, I opened the contract again. Section 14B, subsection Roman 2, Exhibit H. In the event that Mary Harmon is removed from the Adverlux account without prior written consent from both parties, the client reserves the right to terminate this agreement without penalty. I stared at my name. Full legal, bolded. They thought I was the glue, but I was the fuse. Didn't sleep that night. I drafted one more email, calm, surgical. Dear legal, just flagging. Per Exhibit H of the Adverlux MSA, please confirm the client has provided written approval of recent team changes. Happy to discuss. I copied no one else. I didn't expect a reply, and I didn't need one, because when you remove the wrong person from the picture, sometimes the whole damn frame collapses. And I was already carving out where I'd hang it. First real crack came in the form of silence. Adverlux, normally prompt, exacting, almost obsessive, began missing meetings. Or rather, they showed up, cameras off, mics muted, no small talk. The kind of passive-aggressive withdrawal that corporate clients use when they are deciding whether to ghost you or sue you. Kyle noticed, of course. His solution was to send more emojis. During a QBR, quarterly business review, what used to be a serious compliance milestone, he opened with, "We've been absolutely crushing brand engagement, guys," and launched a slide deck so heavy on gradients and vague metrics, it could have doubled as a college marketing thesis. He referenced a non-existent Federal Brand Clarity Act like it was gospel. Adverlux didn't say a word, just took notes. Until the very end, when their head of compliance, a woman named Teresa, who once made a Deloitte partner, cry, unmuted and said flatly, "Did you mean the Federal Communications Transparency Disclosure Guidelines?" Kyle blinked. Yeah, that. Same difference. It was not the same difference. I didn't even see the call coming. I was eating lunch at my desk, going over anonymized feedback from another client's postmortem when my personal phone buzzed. Unknown number. Washington, D.C. area code. Mary Harmon, the voice asked. Even the way she said it sounded like a warning shot. Yes, speaking. This is Teresa Langdon from Adverlux. Just a quick question, are you no longer on our account? I paused, carefully. Not officially, I said, but I'm still here if you need clarity. She exhaled through her nose. That little microsecond pause when someone's running calculations in their head. Interesting, she said, then hung up. That was the moment I knew the fire was lit. By that evening, internal chatter at Stratix was humming. Kyle had gotten feedback from Adverlux about tonal misalignment. Nick called it just growing pains. I called it inevitable. Nick's response was to double down. This is a high-velocity shift, he said in a team huddle. Adverlux needs to trust the system, not a single individual. No one looked at me. They didn't have to. They were already smelling the smoke. Later that night, I poured a glass of wine, opened my laptop, read the contract. Again, for maybe the 10th time, there it was. Section 14B, subsection Roman 2. Exhibit H, key personnel, Mary Harmon. Language clear as glass, removal of the named personnel without mutual written consent constitutes grounds for immediate, penalty-free termination. Still bold, still binding, and still unread by every man currently pretending to lead that account. I emailed myself a PDF copy. Then I printed it 3 times, one for my home files, one for the safety deposit box I never thought I'd use, and one I tucked into the inside flap of my bag. Just in case, I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. I was something colder, the kind of cold that doesn't fade, the kind that sharpens. Every move after that was precise. I flagged language in other contracts. Updated my LinkedIn, not publicly, just the back end. Quiet little digital breadcrumbs, just in case anyone went looking. Because the thing about being invisible is, you learn how to see everything. Kyle was drowning. Nick didn't know it yet, but the tide had already shifted. And I had Exhibit H. I didn't need to raise my voice. I just needed to wait. Nick moved through the office like he was prepping for the Super Bowl. Meetings doubled. Slide decks multiplied like bacteria in a Petri dish. Half the company was now on standby for the Adverlux signing, $50 million renewal that would lock us in as agency of record across all North American units. Everyone wanted a piece. Everyone except, apparently, me. I wasn't on the briefing threads. I wasn't on the call calendar. My access to the Adverlux shared drive had been quietly revoked. No explanation, no error message, just access denied. When I asked IT, they said, per management update. When I asked management, I got silence. And still, I showed up, punctual, professional, coffee in hand, smiling just enough to scare them. Kyle was riding high. He'd gotten himself a new haircut and a monogrammed notebook. I caught him once outside the client war room, practicing his opening lines like a high schooler auditioning for Glengarry Glen Ross. Let's talk scale, let's talk scale. It would have been funny if it weren't so dangerous. Adverlux wasn't buying scale. They were buying trust, process, continuity. Very things Nick had yanked out like foundation beams because he didn't like how quietly I kept them in place. But I wasn't here to fix it. Not anymore. I was here to document it. So when the prep email went out, detailing timelines, deliverables, even a seating chart, and my name was once again nowhere, I didn't barge in. I didn't advocate for my inclusion. I wrote one short, polite message and sent it to legal. Hi team, just a quick reminder to ensure the Adverlux renewal draft aligns with their preferred terms, especially Exhibit H. Happy to assist with context if needed. No reply. 4 minutes later, I got a thumbs up emoji from the Associate General Counsel. No words, just thumbs up. But Slack shows read receipts, and I saw what she did next. She opened the contract archive. She clicked Exhibit H. She hovered for 5 full minutes, then pinged her superior. Didn't need to see the messages. I could feel the shift in the air. When people start checking, that's when they realize how far they've drifted from the shore. The next day, Nick gathered the signing team in the executive conference room, glass walls, leather chairs, catered lunch. I wasn't invited, but I passed by slowly on the way to refill my coffee. Inside, Kyle was giving a practice run of the pitch. His voice cracked on governance continuity. I nearly laughed. In my inbox, no new messages. In my pocket, a hard copy of the contract with my name in Exhibit H. I walked back to my desk, closed my Slack, opened a private browser, and began researching compensation ranges at holding firms I'd once turned down out of loyalty. The kinds of places Adverlux's parent company owned. The kinds of places that paid attention to people like me when the dust cleared. I wasn't sabotaging. I wasn't warning. I was waiting. It had set the stage for a flawless win. The press release was already drafted. The firm's founder was flying in. There were rumors of a champagne toast and a branded gift box for the Adverlux team. But in the flurry of ambition, no one had bothered to verify if the contract they were about to sign was still valid. Because they'd removed the key person, without asking, without reading, without thinking it mattered. And that clause, it hadn't moved. It hadn't expired. It hadn't blinked. Just waited. Quiet, binding, and fully enforceable. Signing day arrived like a courtroom drama dressed up as a press event. The office buzzed with false confidence. Caterers in black polos wheeled in trays of croissants no one would eat. Someone arranged a vase of white lilies in the foyer like we were burying something sacred. And the marketing intern hovered nervously near the glass conference room with a DSLR camera, ready to document history. Adverlux's team arrived at 9:03 a.m. on the dot. They never arrived early, never late. Just precise, like their audit teams, like their data governance procedures, like their expectations. 4 of them walked in, all suits, all quiet. Teresa Langdon, head of compliance, led the pack. Her face was neutral, unreadable. She didn't shake hands. She nodded once, then opened her laptop like a sword being unsheathed. I wasn't there, not physically. But my name was. The seating chart had been carefully constructed. Nick at the head, Kyle to his right, legal at the other end. Power choreography. Optics. Nick even wore a pocket square, red, which he thought made him look decisive. It made him look like he was trying too hard. Kyle started with his prepared remarks. "We're really excited to move forward with the next evolution of this partnership," he said. I know he practiced that line because I found a voice memo of it in the shared Slack files 2 days prior. Next evolution was his new favorite buzzword. Adverlux's side listened. No expressions, just the occasional tap of a keyboard. Nick took over. He launched into a monologue about synergies, long-term alignment, value creation. He didn't notice that Teresa wasn't looking at him. She was flipping through the contract, not the top pages, not the executive summary. She went to the back, Exhibit H, and that's when everything stopped. Teresa tapped her finger once on the page, not loudly, just enough to make the lawyer sitting next to her lean in. He adjusted his glasses, looked down. Then he said, casually like he was reading a weather report, "Key person, Mary Harmon." Nick paused mid-sentence. "Apologies?" he asked, half laughing. That's an old version." Mary's moved into a different capacity. Lawyer turned the page back toward him, rotated it for visibility, and replied, still calm, "This is the final executed version. You'll notice the clause is still in force." Kyle opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "We've been operating under the assumption that the clause was symbolic." Teresa finally looked up. Her voice was surgical. "You removed her without our written consent." Nick tried to wave it off. Mary's still very much with Stratix, simply reallocating internal capacity to better align with the client's evolving needs. "That breaches condition 14B, Teresa said, not raising her voice. Explicitly, it states that removal of the named key person without prior mutual consent gives Adverlux the right to terminate the agreement without financial penalty. Nick's smile had collapsed into something strained and twitchy. "Surely we can. Stop," said Adverlux's legal counsel. That one word landed like a grenade. The room fell into an unnatural silence, like sound had been turned off at the source. The intern outside slowly lowered his camera. The lawyer pushed the contract forward. "We won't be signing today. We're exercising our right under Exhibit H. This relationship is no longer aligned with our compliance standards." Nick stammered something about core value mismatches. Teresa stood up. "Tell Mary," she said, "thank you for her service." Clarity was rare. Then Adverlux packed their bags. No shouting, no drama, just 4 suits, a contract folder, and the quiet exodus of $50 million walking out through a glass door. And in that room full of suits, pastries, and scripted success, one name, my name, was the only one that still held any weight. I wasn't there. But my clause was. It was the lawyer's face that cracked first. Right after Adverlux's counsel pointed to Exhibit H, right after Teresa Langdon stood without waiting for rebuttal, the room pivoted. And not dramatically, there was no shouting, no clattering chairs or storming out. Just gravity, heavy and sudden, like everyone realized at once that the floor had been yanked out from under them. The associate GC for Stratix, Carla, a capable woman who usually kept a poker face even when a contract caught fire, went pale, not confused, not skeptical. Pale. She leaned forward like someone realizing she was about to be named in a deposition, scanned the clause again, and just whispered, "Don't sign." 2 words, flat, final. Nick didn't hear her at first. He was already scrambling into his performance zone. Hands open, mouth half-formed into a negotiation pitch, that salesman shine kicking in like adrenaline. "We're obviously aligned in our long-term vision here," he said, turning to Adverlux's legal team, trying to summon some phantom of authority. "Let's not let a line item detail." Teresa didn't even sit back down. She just collected her laptop, slid the folder closed, and nodded to her team. "No further discussion," she said. The contract sat there on the table, unsigned, crisp, immaculate, like an untouched gravestone. Adverlux didn't raise their voices. They didn't argue. They didn't threaten lawsuits or demand restitution. They simply left, one by one. No eye contact. No small talk. Only the soft click of the glass conference room door closing behind them. That was when Nick looked around and realized no one would meet his eyes. Kyle stared at the table like he was trying to read instructions that weren't printed. The intern outside had disappeared. Someone from operations slowly unplugged the projector. Carla, still blinking like she'd seen a ghost, quietly picked up her notes and muttered something about retroactive indemnity concerns. And HR, they started whispering, not loudly, just loud enough, material misrepresentation. Clause was active. She was removed without process. There was no more hiding the truth. Everyone in that room now knew 2 things. Nick had never read the full contract. Mary Harmon had, and she'd put a tripwire in it that detonated exactly as designed. That was when I got the text. Not from Kyle, not from Nick. From a facilities coordinator who used to bring me black tea during late-night deck reviews. It said they left the contract on the table. No signature. Nick's freaking out. HR is in a side room with legal. Thought you should know. I didn't reply. Instead, I looked up from my seat at the quiet cafe 3 blocks away, where I'd been watching the office tower through the window like a ghost from another timeline. I stirred my tea, smiled, because the thing about being written out of the story is that you get to control how the last chapter ends. Nick tried to spin it, tried to throw sand in the air, build a fog of confusion thick enough to dodge the blame. He called an emergency alignment recap meeting with legal, HR, and Stratix leadership less than an hour after Adverlux walked. No agenda. Just a lot of hand gestures, blame dispersion. The phrase unexpected process failure used like holy water. He started with Kyle. Obviously the messaging wasn't aligned, he said, tapping the table with the back of his pen like a judge issuing a warning. We let a junior lead a high-sensitivity renewal. Rookie mistake. Kyle, to his credit, didn't even try to defend himself. He just sat there, ghost white, clutching his monogrammed notebook like it could absorb the fallout through osmosis. Nick pivoted to legal. We need to seriously review our clause awareness protocols. If we'd had a real red flag system, we wouldn't be here. That's when Carla finally spoke. Calm, measured. Mary sent 3 separate reminders about Exhibit H in the 2 weeks leading up to signing. All documented, all timestamped. She CC'd legal and included the specific clause language, including 1 email directly to you. Nick blinked. That never hit my inbox. Was marked as read, Carla said without looking up, and you replied with a thumbs-up emoji. There was a silence so thick it felt like someone had dropped concrete over the table. HR shuffled papers they weren't reading. The strategy director coughed into her sleeve. By that afternoon, the Stratix board had convened. Not an email thread, not a Teams call. A full, physical meeting. They cleared the top floor, ordered catering that no one touched, pulled performance reports going back a year. Suddenly, everyone remembered how much Adverlux accounted for in quarterly revenue. Early termination clauses were read out loud. Clawback provisions were highlighted. One board member asked flatly, so you knowingly removed the person contractually tied to the client's renewal without checking the client's consent. Nick stammered, fumbled, blamed a legacy structure. Another member replied, is that what we're calling Mary now? Legacy? The room turned colder than a server farm. Meanwhile, across town, I sat in the corner booth of that same cafe, earbuds in, laptop open, untouched tea gone cold. Watching it all happen through back-channel pings and nervous check-in messages from former coworkers who were suddenly rediscovering their LinkedIn passwords. My phone vibrated. Not a text, an email. Subject, Strategic Opportunities Adverlux Global. I opened it. A formal offer. Clear. Generous. Very intentional. They didn't just want me on the North American account. They wanted me to oversee compliance strategy across all 5 subsidiaries. VP level, double my pay, direct report to the COO. I stared at it for a long time, then leaned back in my chair and finally exhaled. Not from relief, from release. 12 years of holding it all together, of being the glue, of being invisible until it hurt. Now, we're unraveling under the weight of their own arrogance. All because someone decided I was replaceable, and never thought to ask what I'd already built into the walls. The elevator doors slid open with the kind of hush only money can buy. Polished wood paneling, backlit logo, quiet floors that made every footstep sound intentional. Adverlux Global Headquarters wasn't trying to impress. They assumed you already knew who they were. I stepped out into a space that smelled like decisions. The receptionist greeted me by name, handed me my badge, and directed me to the corner office on the compliance floor. No orientation packet, no HR pep talk, just a short nod and a smile that said, we've been waiting for you. The nameplate on the door was temporary, plastic, slid in sideways. But it was mine. Mary Harmon, VP Strategic Compliance, Global Accounts 5 subsidiaries, multiple time zones, regulatory bodies on 3 continents. I would touch every document, every client architecture, every clause, including the next Stratix contract, because Adverlux wasn't walking away from $50 million. They were simply rewriting who held the pen. The room was bigger than anything I'd ever had at Stratix. Floor-to-ceiling glass, 2 monitors already configured, and a brand new espresso machine humming in the corner. No startup kitsch, no ego posters on the wall. Just function, power, Precision. I sat down, booted up my laptop, opened my personal archive, found the PDF. Termination letter Stratix Partners, it was short, formatted like they were trying to save ink. A single paragraph that called my transition a strategic realignment, thanked me for my years of dedication, and offered 3 weeks of severance. I hit forward. Addressed it to Nick Withers at Stratix Global. Subject: Exhibit H. No message body. Just the attachment. I hit send. Then I reached into my bag and pulled out the last thing I had packed before leaving my apartment that morning, a printed copy of the contract clause. Section 14B, subsection Roman 2. Exhibit H. Key personnel dependency. In the event that Mary Harmon is removed from the Adverlux account without prior written consent from both parties, the client reserves the right to terminate this agreement without penalty. I slid it into a simple black frame. No gold trim, no flourish, just glass and ink and weight. I hung it on the wall across from my desk at perfect eye level. Below it, a small brass plate I had custom engraved. It read, "Dependencies aren't weaknesses. They're leverage if you know how to use them." I leaned back in my chair, hands folded. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat in the stillness. Because some wins don't need applause. They just need proof. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.